This week on the Destination Angler.
It's a beautiful corridor. There's no cell phone service down there for 100 miles. There's natural hot springs, incredible blue ribbon fishery, like you mentioned earlier, the Westslope Cutthroat, rainbows, whitefish, and bull trout, and they're scattered throughout the whole 100-mile journey. I think if you look at one river that has so much to offer, I think, the Middle Fork really comes out top.
That was Guy Robbins on the Middle Fork of the Salmon River. Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping you find new trout water so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. And by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. We've got some great shows coming your way. Super excited to hear about alpine lakes in the Indian Peaks Wilderness in Colorado. Then muskies on the fly on the St. Croix River in Wisconsin. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode on the Devil's River in Texas with Kevin Stubbs, who breaks down the fishing and shares stories of settlers, Comanches, and Indian pictographs, the King Ranch, Nolan Ryan, and Brad Pitt, along with some tips on targeting carp and smallies. You won't want to miss these shows, and remember to hit that subscribe button to catch all the Destination Angler episodes coming your way. And if you like the show, please tell a buddy. And today our destination is the Middle Fork of the Salmon River, which is a northern Idaho blue ribbon fishery with veteran fly fishing and adventure guide Guy Robbins, Silver Creek Outfitters, Ketchum, Idaho. Considered one of the most rugged and isolated adventure trips in the lower 48, the Middle Fork is famous for a 6-day, 100-mile float through the massive Frank Church Wilderness area. And man, let me tell you, this is some of the most stunning scenery in the West. Beautiful canyons, emerald green pools, great whitewater, and hungry native Westslope Cutthroat trout that love to look up. Guy has been floating the Middle Fork for 30 years and leading adventure trips for 40. Today, he breaks down the Middle Fork for the fly angler and shares great stories of rafting in the Himalayas, scary moments on El Capitan, thoughts on free climbers and famous recluses, dynamite and log jams, also tips on remote tributaries you can fish, and stick around to the end for a great story of guiding in Napal. Hey, better leave your cell phones at home because we're going remote with Guy. Well, Guy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Steve, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you about the Middle Fork of the Salmon River and all the great fly fishing and all the adventures you can have on that river. So thank you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that too. And I want to dig into your background too and all the different trips you've taken around the world. Bengal tiger sounds pretty interesting to me. So you're right there in Ketchum, Idaho, and that's a beautiful part of the world, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about life in Ketchum, Idaho.
Yeah, so Ketchum, Idaho is located in kind of central Idaho, and has a long, rich history as a resort. Originally, it was a little mining town, and Earl Harriman decided he wanted to build a ski resort here. So he built a railroad that came right to town and started attracting lots of Hollywood movie stars here for the summer and the winter, and kind of made it this exclusive resort. And from there, it's grown to what it is today. But beautiful little town, probably about 3,500 people live here year round. We have great skiing, obviously, great mountain biking,
Yeah,
great fly fishing, all kinds of fun. Like if you're an outdoor enthusiast, you can afford to live here. So it's a pretty nice place to live. Yeah, if you like the outdoors.
yeah. I feel like all those really nice mountain towns have just exploded in terms of what it costs to live there.
Yeah, definitely the cost of living has gone up in this town, but it's still a beautiful place to live, and it's a beautiful place to raise your family. Your kids grow up skiing and biking and, spending a lot more time in the outdoors.
That's great. And you guys got a lot of good snow this year, didn't you?
We did, yeah. We actually had some pretty record snow years this year, and even after the ski resort closed, it just kept on snowing and snowing and snowing. So, and then we've had a really wet spring too. So, right now there's not much guiding going on as the rivers are super high and somewhat unfishable. But in the next couple of weeks, that there should change, and my guiding season will be getting going.
Off and running. All right. Well, let's talk about the fly fishing in your part of the world. Just kind of start with the broad area. What are the main fishing opportunities there in your part of Idaho?
Yeah, so Steve, right here within an hour's drive of here, right downtown, we have the Bigwood River. That's the river that drains the Bigwood Valley that Ketchum sits in. And then a little bit north of us, on the other side of the pass, we have all the Salmon River drainage, which the Middle Fork is one of them. We also have Silver Creek Preserve, which is a spring creek, very, very famous spring creek, blue ribbon, very, very wise, cautious, hard to catch fish. And then we have the Lost River Range, which is about an hour north of here. The Snake River has awesome fishing too. But yeah, Steve, within about an hour's drive of here, we have all kinds of fishing from, brown trout, rainbow trout, bull trout, sturgeon, bass, all kinds of, species within an hour's drive of here.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've done shows. I did a show on Silver Creek a while back, and I did a show on that Lost River drainage with a guy from your DNR. And so, yeah, you've probably got enough to keep you busy for a lifetime out there, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. And, Silver Creek, the graduate school of fly fishing, as we call it. I mean, every time you go down there, you're going to learn something new. So, every river around here can be challenging, but definitely Silver Creek keeps you on your toes.
I've heard. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Middle Fork. So, kind of the star of the show today. And gosh, I've been hearing about the Middle Fork for years, and also the River of No Return. But those are two different rivers, correct?
Yes, the main stem of the salmon is really the River of No Return. And it gets its name, Steve, from, back in the day when the early pioneers, they could travel down the river, but there's too much whitewater, so they could never bring their boats back up the river. So that's how it originally got their name. But the Middle Fork is one stem of the main river, and it's encompassed in that name, the Frank Church Wilderness. But it is not the River of No Return. The Salmon River, is actually that river. Yeah.
Okay, so a one way street. You're not coming back if you're heading.
No. Well, these days they do have jet boats that can bring you up and down the river, get you back up the river. But, back in the early pioneering days when they would run the big scows down that river, they would often, break the scows down and then build their cabins with those boats because they could get them back upstream.
Okay. Yeah. Super interesting. I want to come back to the history of this area because there's just a lot of neat things that went on here. But I wonder if you could kind of tell us in your mind, like what makes the Middle Fork just so special in your mind?
Well, I think one of the great things, many things about the Middle Fork is that it's rich in so many different aspects. If you look back to the actual history of the River Canyon, the sheep-eater Indians were some of the first people to be living down in that river corridor. And then shortly after that, the miners and the hermits and all the reclusive type people started moving into the canyon for the fishing and the hunting. And then in the early 20s, people started running the river in rafts and kayaks and different kinds of wooden boats, scows back in the day.
Cool.
Yeah, and then, it's a beautiful corridor. There's no cell phone service down there for 100 miles. There's natural hot springs, incredible blue ribbon fishery, like you mentioned earlier, the Westslope Cutthroat, rainbows, whitefish, and bull trout, and they're scattered throughout the whole 100-mile journey. And beautiful wildlife, lots of bighorn sheep, ospreys, golden eagles, otters, beavers, things like that. And just, great whitewater too. If, rapids up to class 3, and they're all scattered nicely throughout the river corridor. So I think if you look at one river that has so much to offer, I think, the Middle Fork really comes out top as far as, having great everything going on with it. The whitewater, the wildlife, the fishing, the scenery, everything just makes it a very, very special river.
Sounds like it's just jaw drop gorgeous. Now, is the there's a big canyon in this area too, right? That's like 7,000 feet deep. Is that on the Middle Fork, or where is that?
There is a pretty deep canyon down there too. So, people often refer to there's a pretty deep canyon down in Hell's Canyon on the Snake, and I know that there's considered maybe as deep as some parts of the Grand Canyon. But yeah, definitely down once you get down into the Little Impassable Canyon, which is in the last 25 miles of the river before its confluence with the main salmon. We start getting down into 1,500-foot walls that just come down into the river. Yeah, and it definitely is a super deep canyon. Once you get down in there, there is no trail, and you are committed to finishing the river. You can't hike out once you get down into that last 25 miles. There is a trail that follows pretty well the whole river, but when you get down to about mile 75, the river gets impassable, obviously, and then the trail leaves and goes up Big Creek, and yeah, it's just basically the cliffs come almost right down to the river in places.
I mean, is it hard to get your boats in and out of there?
No, I mean once you're in there, it's pretty easy. You can drive on a dirt road the whole way to Boundary Creek, which is the normal put-in for the river, and then once you're on, you are pretty committed. There are some airstrips down to about mile 65. So just
airstrips, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, there's some small backcountry airstrips. So if you did have some kind of a medical emergency, or you felt that the river was too dangerous for you, you could always fly out of the river canyon. But once you get past that mile 65, there's nowhere to land a plane down there.
You're in it.
You are committed. Yeah, definitely.
Well, give us a sense of like, what's the water like, from the start all the way down through, like, what are the major sections and what kind of water am I going to encounter?
Yeah. So, right off the top at, after the get in at Boundary Creek, there is pretty good gradient, and there's quite a lot of class 3 whitewater right in the top. There's Velvet Falls, which is a real classic drop that often gets unsuspecting boaters, and it's at mile 7. So often you're just kind of getting going, and if you do get offline there's a good chance that you could flip your boat, but it's pretty flat afterwards, so you can recover everything. But once you get down to once you get down to around mile 25, things start to flatten out a bit, and that's where the topography of the river is going to change. We're like in that first 25 miles, you're up in the high alpine zone, and more big fir trees, big ponderosa trees. And then in the middle part of the river, the gradient eases off, and we get more into the rolling sage hills with, scattered ponderosas on the bank. And there are some class 3 rapids within that stretch. And then, as I was saying, once you get down past mile 65, you begin to enter the Little Impassable Canyon. And that's, as I said, where the cliffs will start to steepen on the side, and then at mile 75, you're going to get to where the trail ends, and then all the gradients are going to start to pick back up again. And there's a lot of whitewater from that marker right down to the confluence with the main salmon. So definitely the majority of the whitewater is condensed into that last 25 miles.
Okay. Are you doing less fishing when you're going through all that whitewater? Imagine you kind of have to set the rod down and hang on, don't you?
Definitely. There is great fishing down there too. And but yeah, when you are going through those rapids, you would definitely want your plants to be, holding onto the rod and definitely holding onto the boat for sure. But once you're through the rapids, out come the rods again, and back to fishing again.
Okay, so it sounds like there's plenty of whitewater to navigate where you can be doing some fishing for quite a bit of time then.
Yes, yeah, no, there is. You're going to get plenty of fishing time, for sure. It's not all constant whitewater. There are some nice calm mornings or afternoons where you're not getting splashed, and the fishing is fantastic.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Huge news, folks. The #1 fishing app, and I'm talking Trout Routes here, has been updated to include the entire lower 48. That's 50,000 streams mapped and classified into 4 categories and 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. There's nothing more exciting than finding that new trout stream or access point. I'm a huge fan of Trout Routes because they make it so easy. Say goodbye to stumbling around country roads looking for your next spot, because Trout Routes provides every detail you need for each stream, including public and private bridges, stream flows, trail access, where to park, camping opportunities, boat ramps, and more. No service, no problem. You can save maps for offline use. With Trout Routes, I've found dozens of new streams and access points I never would have known about. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. I'd love to hear about the experience, right? So you're taking people on a 5 night, 6-day trip. Give me an idea. What's the experience like for a rafter fly angler?
Yeah, so 6 days, 5 nights, and we just camp out on the banks of the river, and all the food and all your tents are all pitched for you. We cook for you and basically take great care of you out there. And all you guys really have to do is just to enjoy the fishing and have a nice time. But your kind of standard day would be to wake up, have some breakfast, get on the river by about 10 o'clock, float and fish till lunchtime, pull over, have a great riverside lunch, pack up and be back on the river by 2 o'clock or so, and then float down to camp by 4:30 or so. And
Okay.
yeah, when you arrive at camp, we have several boats that will go ahead, and they will pitch your tent for you, get the kitchen set up, and have appetizers ready by the time that you pull into camp. So it is pretty luxurious.
It sounds pretty bougie.
Pretty bougie. You just kind of eat and fly fish and drink beers. So it's pretty good. Pretty good schedule.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing at all, mate. Nothing at all.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That sounds pretty good. And how's the fishing?
Fishing's fantastic. It's like I said, predominantly Westslope Cutthroats and really, really good dry fly fishing. The water is so clear. You can actually watch these cutties come up from the bottom of the river and take your dry fly.
Wow.
Often people hook set too early because they see the fish coming, and they often hook set. It's like, why did I miss that fish? It's like, well, you have to wait until he actually takes your fly. So lots of cutthroats, and they're probably in that 12 to 14, 15-inch size average, but lots of fish. And if you're a beginner or even an expert fisherman, you can go out and have a lot of fun. As a beginner, you can go out and really get addicted to the sport because the fish are so willing to take your dry fly. There's no sitting around for hours waiting for a bite. It's, they are going to take your fly as soon as it hits the water.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, Westslope Cutthroat is probably what you're going to catch 95% of the time. There are some rainbows there too. There are also whitefish and also bull trout too.
Yeah. Do you get bull trout on a dry ever, or do you have to switch and throw streamers?
You do get them occasionally, but definitely the best way to catch them is to catch them with streamers for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Can you target bull trout on this river?
You can. Yeah.
Huh. Is it all catch and release?
Yeah, it's all catch and release, single barbless hooks. You can fly fish for them, obviously. You can use spinners, lures, but again, they have to have just a single deep barbed hook, and then obviously no bait. Yeah.
Right. Do you ever take spin fishermen with you?
I have, but just once.
All right. There you go, folks.
Yeah.
He's a fly
yeah.
fisherman.
Most of the people come there to fly fish, but I do remember one group of guys and they bought their spin rods and they were throwing their little rubber worms and stuff, and they actually did really well. They actually caught
No kidding.
fish. Yeah. But most of the people that we take are fly fishermen, and people come to that river to learn how to fly fish. Yeah, because it is
Really?
yeah.
What a classroom. I mean, you're describing watching a cutthroat come off the bottom of the river and come up and take your fly. That would be exciting for anybody, but particularly for a beginner.
Yeah.
I got to believe.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. 'Cause I think often, beginners are like, oh, I'm going to be sitting there and nothing's going to be happening. And, often they have a short attention span, and if they're not catching anything, they lose interest. Whereas on the Middle Fork, you like throw your fly out there onto that little foam pile, and all of a sudden, you've got a big cutthroat coming up, taking your fly, and all the excitement of that, and then, landing it, and then throw it out again, and 5 minutes later, you got another one.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, the action is pretty good.
Yeah. Sounds like you get busy on
Yeah.
this river.
Yeah.
What's a good day on this river?
A good day for me when I'm just running my boat by myself. Yeah, I've had several 100-fish days just rowing down the river by myself. Yeah, I would say that an average day for, if you have someone who can fish, probably 30 or 40 fish wouldn't be.
Decent angler?
Yeah, if they were a decent angler, and, probably half that if you had a beginner out there.
That's great fishing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great fishing, I'll say. Are you running Mackenzie style boats? Are you taking rafts, or what are you taking down there?
Normally I just run rafts down there, but there are outfitters who do run drift boats down there for sure. Once the river gets a little bit lower, definitely high water, people aren't running drift boats out there. But as things do drop a little bit and the river becomes a little bit more manageable, there definitely are outfitters who run drift boats through there.
Huh. Okay. I always wonder how those Mackenzie drift boats would do in Class 3 rapids.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that those guys are definitely some of the better oarsmen on the river, obviously. They're running wooden boats through Class 3 whitewater for sure.
Yeah. Do you ever flip on this river?
Have I flipped? I don't think I have. No. I mean, I've definitely set up Z-drags to pull boats, wrap boats off of rocks.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yeah, I've been involved with rescues where other guides have flipped, for sure. It could definitely happen. But personally, in my 30 years of running, I've never flipped a boat in there.
Okay.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Right. Hopefully didn't just jinx you there.
Jinx myself. Right. I gotta touch the wood
or
something for a second.
Right. What about in other parts of the world? Have you had some flips?
Definitely. I spent 12 years as an outfitter based in Kathmandu, Nepal, and we operated between northern India, Pakistan, and Nepal throughout the whole 10-month season that we did out there. And we didn't fish too much out there. It was more adventure travel based, whitewater rafting, kayaking, mountaineering, trekking, any kind of adventure that you might want to do. But definitely that was a different league, these big Himalayan rivers. After the monsoon, during the summertime, it just rains every day. So the rivers get really big and violent at that time of year. So I've definitely flipped a lot more boats out there for sure. Yeah.
Is that right? There's actually rafting companies in Pakistan. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, back in the late 80s, Steve, we were up there pioneering adventure travel in that part of the world. And what our idea was to run all the rivers of the Himalaya when they were at their peak.
Really?
Yeah. And so we started up in northern Pakistan that has a spring runoff. They don't have a monsoon up there. They have their big high water from the Karakoram, which is the mountain range up in that part of the world. They have a spring runoff in June, and so end of May, early June. So we were just up there pioneering the rivers and the mountain biking and the trekking, so that we could establish Pakistan as one of our bases for our 10-month season, so that we could be in there, and then we could go to northern India, and we could avoid the monsoon by being up on the north side of the Himalaya, up close to Tibet. And then in the fall, we would go to Napal for the post-monsoon season. So we would operate in 3 countries throughout that 10-month season. Just
no kidding.
Just chasing high water.
Yeah. Were you ever chasing trout?
I did chase trout a little bit up in northern India. When the British were ruling India, they wanted to introduce trout into that part of the world so that they could go fish for them.
Of course.
Yes, of course. The old British Empire. They also, I think, a little known fact is they introduced a lot of German browns into Pakistan, because back in the day, that particular part of Pakistan was run by India. And so they put German browns in a lot of that water. And then the main game fish that people fly fish for out there is the golden mahseer. And it's a fish that runs up and down the rivers. It does kind of migrate like a salmon. It doesn't go to the ocean, but it migrates up and down the rivers, all the rivers of the Himalaya.
Huh.
And so people do fly fish for that in Bhutan and in Nepal and parts of India.
No kidding. I had no idea. How big does a golden mahseer get?
The golden mahseer, they'll, big ones probably get up to 25, 30, 40 pounds.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it's a big fish. Yeah, it's a big fish. They're somewhat elusive, hard to catch. In lots of these countries, they are a pretty big main source of food. So to some extent, they have been maybe over-harvested, but definitely in countries like Bhutan, they are protected, and you have to have special permission to fish for them. It is considered the king's fish in Bhutan. So a lot more, there's a lot more fish in Bhutan, say, than there is in Nepal or parts of India.
Okay. Watching the news, you watch news shows when we were involved as a country in Afghanistan, I was, they would show these rivers, and I'm always thinking, I wonder if there's trout in those rivers. Do you think they're golden mahseer in those rivers, or what do you think they'd be fishing for in a place like Afghanistan? Any idea?
Yes, they have a fish called the snow trout. It may be related to some trout in some way. I don't think so, but that's what they fish for up in there. And they have some other species that they fish for, but as far as species that we're familiar with, definitely the German browns up in Pakistan. I'm not sure if they put them in Afghanistan, but definitely up in northern Pakistan. There's actually quite a lot of German browns. Yeah. No one. I don't think really Westerners go up there to fish for them.
Not much, probably.
Probably because people don't know about them, and just with the way things have been going in the world recently, people don't really travel up there as much.
There you go, folks. If you ever go over to that part of the world, Pakistan and India, there's a fish named a golden mahseer. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Hey, anglers. Well, you've heard me talking about Angler's Coffee now for over a year now, and I have a question for you. Have you tasted it yet? If you have, then you know what I'm talking about. It's darn good coffee, isn't it? And if you're like me, tasting's believing. And believe me, this coffee tastes great. My wife and I are hooked on it. That's because Angler's Coffee offers an impressive spectrum of flavor profiles, so there's something for everyone. Like their smooth, medium roast El Care Caddis blend. Using beans from Central America and Indonesia with a perfect balance of body and aroma, the Caddis blend gives creamy sweet tasting notes of milk chocolate and clove. It's a real crowd pleaser. Save 10% with a custom subscription like I did and pick the coffee blends you want delivered to your doorstep. If you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations that directly impact the fly fishing community. So put a smile on your face and give it a shot. That's anglerscoffee.com. Tasting's believing. Back to the Middle Fork. So this is primarily a dry fly fishery. Are you pretty much fishing dry flies the whole time?
Pretty well. Sometimes in the afternoon the wind picks up a little bit and the fishing can quiet down a little bit when it gets hot. And so often, you might put a little dropper, a little nymph dropper off the back of your dry fly. And you can fish with streamers too. And again, if it's hot, a difficult day, you could change out to like a full nymphing setup. But normally a dry dropper will, catch you fish when it gets hot in the afternoon.
I gotcha. And what kind of, what's your setup? What's, rod and reel line or, like line and tippet, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So your kind of standard setup, I would say, for a Middle Fork trip would be a 5-weight. The fish aren't super leader shy out there. So your kind of standard 9-foot 3-weight, 3X tippet is fine.
Really? Huh.
Yeah. You don't need long, thin tippet out there. And then the kind of flies that you're going to be using, early season, you get the stones, you get the golden stones and the salmon flies. Caddis run most of the season. We do have a spruce moth hatch that happens just in the top 25 miles of the river, more up in that alpine zone up there. And that happens towards the end of June. And then as the season goes on, like I said, caddis throughout the whole time, and then hoppers, beetles and ants always. And so those are kind of the main flies. And then streamers, like I say, often we're just going to fish dry flies, but sometimes people like to throw streamers, and you'll definitely catch some of those bigger cutthroats, maybe up to 17 or 18 inches. And, you might even pick up a bull trout. And so standard nymphs, prince nymphs, pheasant tails, girdle bugs, stonefly patterns, great.
Sure. Standard stuff.
Yeah, very much standard.
Tell me about that spruce moth. What's that pattern look like?
So it's basically like a little tan colored moth, like a little tan caddis would work if you didn't have that pattern with you. But it's just a little tan colored fly. It looks a lot like a little tan caddis. And so, it's a super great hatch. I mean, they come out in prolific numbers.
Oh, okay.
It's probably one of my favorite hatches down there because it is so classic, prolific. You just look downstream, there's these little tan moths all over the river, and just a classic hatch with fish feeding furiously.
Wow, nice. What size?
You're probably throwing 10s. Yeah, 10s.
Okay, pretty good. I think I've fished these before. Are they kind of like our super delta wing shape versus just like a caddis, like an elk hair caddis might not be quite as delta wing, but... Yeah.
The wings are a little bit more like that. And, often you would, fish it, let's call it a spinner, right? It's not really such a spinner, I guess it could be, but it's dead, wings flat on the river, and they're just floating down.
Oh, that's great. What would you say is your most prolific hatch on the river?
I would say that's definitely it. But, springtime, there's a lot of golden stones out there too. You like find them under your sleeping bag. And, when you come down to your raft in the morning, you just see the casings all up the side of them. So there's another prolific hatch, the golden stones. And then, caddis happens every night, every day, every night. So there's definitely a good, consistent hatch that you can count on year round.
Okay.
Throughout the whole river. Yeah, throughout the whole river.
Now, this river is a permitted river, correct? There's only a certain number of boats allowed down a day. Is that right? I'm kind of curious, how crowded does it get?
Yeah, it is a permitted river, Steve. You are correct on that. It's managed by the Forestry Service, and they allow 6 boats to launch every day. And that's 4 commercial outfitters and then 2 private trips. And each of those trips is maxed out at 30 people. So that is the most
Okay.
that like each group could take. So definitely during, the second part of end of June, July and August are super busy because that's prime time when, the weather is settled, the river's starting to come down and it's going to start to clear a little bit. And then the fishing starts to get better. The days are getting longer.
Yeah. Right.
But, definitely during that time, you are going to see other boats, but it certainly, I don't think did detracts from the beauty of the trip.
Right. How does it affect the fishing? I mean, do the fish, if a boat goes over a hole, do the fish go down for a couple minutes, or what's it like?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's going to put some fish down, but you just fish the other side. You just go down the other bank. If you come around the corner and there's a whole string of boats fishing, say the left bank, then just pull over the right bank. That probably hasn't been fished because it's maybe not as easy to fish, and then off you go again. But good,
Nice.
consistent fishing every day, even if there are boats who are in front of you. Yeah, just maybe choose lines that maybe not as taken as much. They're not maybe
I got you.
much like obvious lines to fish, for sure.
And not everybody's fishing, I'm assuming.
Well, exactly. There's the other thing. Often, lots of these trips, there'll be one or two people fishing off a boat, and some people are in a paddle raft. Some people are in the little inflatable kayaks. So there's lots of different ways that you can float down the river if you're not interested in fishing. And there are other outfitters who do more fishing specific trips. But a lot of them, there might only be one or two people fishing on the whole trip. And often they're just, beginners who have just bought a rod along because they've heard the fishing is good and they're kind of teaching themselves as they go. So I wouldn't say that, you're going to be losing fish because there's a couple of boats fishing in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're not going to be alone, but it sounds like the fishing's still really good and it's
Yeah.
still a beautiful area. And I don't know if you're a social person like me, maybe you don't mind a few boats around you that you can chat with some folks. I don't know. I'd kind of like that actually.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's all, it's all pretty social, and there's other boats coming by, and you ask them, "Oh, are you catching any fish?" And "Oh, what are you catching them on?" Or, if you run out of beers, you can always scrounge a couple off of them.
All right. What's the big brewery out there? Is there a fan favorite on the river?
Knowing like fly fishermen, Steve, they'll drink anything.
We're not too discerning, huh?
Yeah, as long as they're somewhat cold.
Yeah, I guess at the end of a one of these days on this river, anything would sound pretty good. I'm assuming.
Yeah,
I feel like
yeah.
food and drink is always better when I'm camping out. I don't know why it is, but it just is.
Yeah, definitely. And on all these commercial trips, the guides take really good care of you. There's always coolers full of ice and beer, and 3-course meals and Dutch oven cooking and riverside grilling. So it's all the food
Nice.
and all the food and the beverages are pretty high class.
What's one of your favorite meals on the river?
One of the guide favorites, I would say, would be a prime rib dinner. So we'll cook two prime ribs in a Dutch oven, and veggies and potatoes and some kind of pineapple upside down cake or some kind of a crumble or something like that. But it's always, I'd say that the meal that the guides are probably often most proud of is the prime rib, because it's pretty hard to cook. And you've got 2 or 3 veggies going on, and you've got a dessert in another Dutch. But just to get it right, just get it the right temperature and everything, and cook as a prime rib should be cooked is you have to know what you're doing out there.
Yeah, sounds good. Do you have like an epic story from the Middle Fork that you can think of that you can tell us?
Let's see, definitely during some of those high water trips, there was the year, God, I can't remember when it was, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, we had some flash flooding in some of the side canyons, and it dumped a whole bunch of wood into the river, and it all got blocked up at mile 20, which is Pistol Creek, which is one of the bigger rapids on the top end, and you get into this bedrock, and there's like an S-turn you have to go through, and there was wood jammed up into that part of the river. It made it totally impassable. It was a big thing, and so all the trips were getting backed up above that because it was impassable, and because it's a wild and scenic designated river, the forestry didn't know how to clear it, and you couldn't get in there with chainsaws. What they ended up doing was they ended up dynamiting the log jam.
I was going to say dynamite, really?
Yeah, I mean it was a big thing because, as I said, it is a wild and scenic designated river. And so that is what they ended up doing. They ended up dynamiting this huge log jam, and it kind of pushed all the wood through, and that allowed all the trips to be able to pass down, through the river, because they were getting backed up every day that they didn't make a decision. There were more and more boats getting, just camping where they could upstream, because the beaches and all the campsites were getting full, 6 boats a day.
Right.
Down. But they did eventually blow it up. And after that, we could continue with our trip.
Did you hear the explosion?
No, I didn't. I didn't hear it. I was a little bit further upstream, but they blew it up, and there was like wood scattered the whole way down the river after that.
Oh my gosh!
But it did
Wow.
open it up enough for boats to be able to pass through. Yeah.
What's the CFS in this river in different spots? Like, how big is this river?
I would say, starting at the top in the fall, it's probably, getting down to maybe 200 or 300 CFS. It gets pretty small up the top in like September, but several thousand during the high water in like May and June. But there's several big tributaries of the Middle Fork. So as it goes down, those do add a lot of volume. We have Camas Creek, and then Loon Creek, and then Big Creek. Those are the 3 main tributaries of the Middle Fork, and they all offer great fly fishing too.
Cool. Do you ever stop and take a little side trip?
We do, yeah. It's just to get off the boat, people can stretch their legs, get some exercise, and I'll often plan my day so that I can spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours hiking up these rivers, and just getting out of the main corridor and getting some exercise, and fishing some of these smaller creeks that come in, because they don't get fished a great deal because they are fairly remote. And so if you wanted to hike a mile or so up the river, you can get to water that doesn't really get fished that much.
I want to take you back to, we started talking a little bit about the history of the area and the sheep-eater Indians and some of the recluses. Weren't there a couple of really famous recluses over the years that lived down in this canyon?
Yes, there were several famous miners who lived in the area. Loon Creek, it's about mile 50 or so. It's about halfway down the river. They found gold up in there, and so there was up to about 1,000 people living up that river, mining gold. But probably one of the more reclusive characters who lived down there was a gentleman named Earl Parrott, and he moved into the canyon in about 1917 or so, and very reclusive. He didn't really like people stopping by his cabin or anything, but he lived down in the corridor for about 28 years. He did a little bit of gold panning down there, but what he was famous for was he had all these gardens, and he grew his own vegetables. He had fruit trees. He had some animals there, and he had one small little cabin right down on the banks of the river, down in the impassable canyon. But what he did, he built a series of ladders and ropes, and he would scale the cliffs to get up to flatter land where he was able to farm. And Nugget Creek came through his property as such. And so he could irrigate all his plants and all his veggies and stuff. But he'd built, probably 600, 700, 800 foot worth of ladders and ropes.
Wow.
To actually scale these cliffs. And so he would travel up and down between his cabins. And he lived down there for a long time, and he eventually passed. And he's buried in the town of Salmon.
That's a heck of a trip to the grocery store. Got to climb
Yeah,
a cliff.
yeah, oh yeah, up and down, up and down. I mean, and he just built these little ladders himself out of wood and branches and things that he could find within the river corridor. But he was probably one of the more famous guys as far as what he was growing. He had all kinds of veggies and fruit trees and everything growing up there.
Yeah, innovative. I read about a guy named Buckskin Bill, who
Yes,
apparently, you heard of him?
yes. He was down. He was down more on the main Salmon.
Okay.
Yeah, but a similar kind of guy. He a very reclusive guy, and he built cabins and a little gun turret lookout area down there. And he has a very, very vivid history. He was a knife maker and a gun maker, hunter, trapper. And he is very famous down on the river de return, Salmon River. Yeah.
Okay. I read that he spent less than $50 a year on supplies and was living off the land.
Yes, 100%. All these people really, that lived throughout the main Salmon and the Middle Fork, they did a little bit of gold panning to get some money and some trapping. And so they would, sell their furs and their gold. They would hike out to some of the, bigger towns and, sell their goods, pick up any basic supplies that they need, and then they were back in the Middle Fork again.
Fascinating. Well, I also read that Lewis and Clark were the first ones, at least Westerners, to discover this, and they took one look at it and said, too rugged for us, and they skirted it.
Yes.
And that's just as fascinating. And then there's a bunch of Indian pictographs in the canyon too, right? Or in the area.
Yes, there are. The Sheepita Indians were, some of the earliest settlers down there, and they get their name because they would harvest the bighorn sheep that roam up and down the canyons there for their meat and for their hides. So they were some of the earliest settlers there, and that there are still several places where you can stop and look at the old pictographs from the times that they were living down there.
Super cool. And was Ted Kaczynski in this area, the Unabomber, by chance?
Oh, I think he was a little bit further north, Steve. I think he was up in northern Idaho.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I never saw him down there.
Yeah, me neither. He just passed away. We're mid-June here. I think he just passed away a few days ago, as a matter of fact.
He did, yeah. I think he was 83 or so. He died. He died in jail. Yeah, just recently in the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. How's the river doing conservation-wise? Any big issues?
It's doing really well. It's a river that changes a lot. It's an old river, but it's still very much a young river. And, we are prone in this river corridor to these microbursts that happen. So, things get hot in the afternoon, those big clouds start to develop. And so we get these very intense localized rainstorms. And so what can often happen is that, these little side creeks that are normally fairly dry, they get blown out and they deposit a lot of rock and mud and silt into the river. And we had a big blowout last summer, and it actually blocked the river so much that it made it unnavigable. It was at mile 7 or so.
Oh.
And you could not float the river from the top all summer.
Really?
Yeah.
What'd you do about that? I mean, what do you do?
Yeah. So, I mentioned earlier that there are those backcountry airstrips. And the main one is at mile 25, Indian Creek it's called. And so what everyone had to do, they had to fly all their equipment on little Cessnas into mile 25 and then begin their trip from there. But it was, there was huge log jams and lots of debris in the river. And this spring, that all got washed out.
Huh. From a microburst?
Yes. Yep.
Wow.
And so that there happens on a fairly, that happens every year, every other year. You like go down and a rapid is different. Or often there's like a new rapids that have been there forever. All of a sudden, there's a big change just because one of those side creeks
Huh.
has blown out
So
and
fascinating.
dumped wood and big boulders into the river. But yes, it's a very, very healthy river. I think the river's in great shape.
Good.
Yeah, I think it's just part of the natural cycle of the river for these for these rock pools and things to happen.
Yeah, sounds like it.
But the actual health of the river is great.
What about the salmon and the steelhead? It used to be a huge, huge salmon and steelhead run through there, right?
Yes, yeah. No, throughout the whole salmon drainage, there used to be historical runs that used to come up the river. But yeah, we do have steelhead come up in like April, May time up into the Fork of Salmon, and then the Chinook are probably starting to begin their journey up there now. Probably by the end of June, you'll start to see them up there into July. And then the fall Chinook, we have fall Chinook up there too, but we're not allowed to fish for them. You can fish for them on the main stem of the Salmon River, but you're not allowed to target them on the middle fork. And actually, in the fall, yeah, just because of the numbers,
They're spawning.
yeah, they are spawning, and they don't want the fish to be disturbed. And even in the fall, when the fall Chinook are coming up, pretty well all the reds are flagged. So you'll be floating down and you'll see some flagging on a tree on the bank. And then so that way that there is a red in that area. And so you have to, go down the other side of the river and give it a wide berth. Yeah.
Okay, that's smart.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears for a minute and hear kind of your story, right? So how did you end up in this adventure fly fishing guiding business living in Ketchum, Idaho?
I ended up in Ketchum here in the late 80s. I was guiding a client in Napal on a kayaking expedition, and we became good friends on the trip. He invited me to come back and spend a winter living with him here in Ketchum. And I thought, oh, that sounds great. And so I moved here for that winter, lived here for about 2 months. And kind of fell in love with the area and thought, oh wow, what a beautiful area. And it was kind of my part-time home for about 10 years because I was running my business in the Himalayas for about 12 years. So this was kind of my home away from home. And so when I sold my business in the Himalaya, I moved to Idaho full-time. And then I started living here in Ketchum full-time and started guiding on the Middle Fork and guiding in the Sawtooth Mountains, guiding rock climbing, different adventure travel trips here in Idaho. But most of my summers were spent, guiding on the Middle Fork.
Okay. So yeah, when you sent me your bio over that you've ridden elephants looking for Bengal tigers, you've scaled El Capitan 9 times. And I'm kind of thinking like, what haven't you done? Give us some stories from all these adventures that you've had around the world. I'd love to hear one or two of your favorite stories.
Well, I think there's many stories of our adventures in the Himalayas, but I think one that maybe stands out as maybe an inspirational story. When we were up in northern Pakistan, we were guiding up there on the rivers, and there's not a lot of traffic up there. It's a fairly remote area, and so there weren't that many tourists up there to support our business. But we did meet this one lady, an Australian lady called Margaret, and she had lost one of her arms in a bus wreck in India years ago on some of her previous travels. And while she was in Africa, she wanted to go rafting on the Zambezi, which is one of the great rivers of Africa. But they wouldn't take her because she only had one arm, and they thought that she would be a liability in that whitewater. However, we decided that we were going to take her. We're like, we'll take you rafting, to hell with those guys in Africa.
Strap her in.
Yeah, strap her in. So we ended up taking her down the river, and everything went well, and we had a wonderful day on the river. But it was a real testament to her courage and her spirit. I think she was a grandmother too. And,
Oh,
she's out
gosh.
there rafting these crazy rivers of northern Pakistan with only one arm. And,
Yeah,
yeah, she was,
that's awesome.
she was determined.
Yeah, I'll say. What about El Capitan? Is that like a multi-pitch, multi-day trip to get to the top of that? Tell me about that.
It is, yeah. Routes up there can take anywhere from 4 days to 10 days, depending on the difficulty.
Wow.
But yeah, it was, I guide rock climbing too. I don't do that anymore, but earlier when I was younger and stronger, I used to guide rock climbing. And when I first came to America in the middle 80s, I came here to rock climb and to climb particularly in Yosemite. And so I ended up climbing El Cap several times, and it's an incredible piece of rock. I like to climb granite, and El Capitan is maybe some of the best granite in the world. And as far as difficult multi-day pitch climbs, El Cap is just a world classic. And once I climbed it once, that wasn't enough. I had to go back and
Is that
climb it a
right?
few more
Okay.
times. Yeah, but I think maybe the fastest I've climbed it is 4 days, and the longest maybe 10.
10 days. Are you getting resupplied? Are people like lowering food down to you? How does that work?
So you take everything you need from the ground up. So you kind of pack your bags at the bottom, and all your food, all your water. Water's a hard thing, and it's heavy too. It's whether it's 7 or 8 pounds a gallon, and you need a gallon each per day. So that's 20 gallons of water you have to carry.
Jeez.
And so all your food, and then you've got all your climbing equipment, which is also super heavy, and numerous ropes. And so, but yeah, you have to take everything with you. So you have to plan accordingly to the amount of days that you think you might be spending up there. And hopefully that, you summit within that time. Otherwise you're starting to go hungry and thirsty.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to run out of water on day 9 when you're 1,000 feet from the top or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
You ever had any scary moments doing that?
Yeah. Some of the routes that I climbed up there were quite technical, and some of the fail-safe mechanisms that you have to put in place are not so safe as such. So, you can potentially take big falls up there. I once took a 100-foot fall.
Wow. With a rope around your waist. You didn't hit the ground or?
I didn't. No,
Okay.
I was about 2,500 foot up the wall.
100 feet though. Jeez.
Yeah. If you fall 100 foot and hit a ledge, that's one thing. But fortunately, I didn't hit a ledge. But it can be, some of the moves that you're making up there can be somewhat tenuous, shall we say.
No kidding. Huh. At the end of that fall, was that a pretty good snap? I mean, I know the rope stretches a little bit, but that probably hurt a little bit, didn't it?
Well, it wasn't that bad, because as you mentioned, Steve, ropes are designed to stretch, and there's a lot more stretch in 100-foot of rope as such than there would be in, say, 10-foot of rope. So often those shorter falls with less rope to absorb that shock can be a little bit more jarring. It's maybe more,
interesting.
not quite a bungee cord type stretch, but definitely a similar kind of analogy where longer rope will give you more absorption. But it's definitely gets the adrenaline going when you fall 100 foot through the air.
I'll bet.
I was definitely at like one stage in more of a Superman type position, head down the cliff, and that definitely adds to the to the excitement. But it was all good. It was all good.
What do you think of these free climbers?
Well, Alex Honnold comes to mind, and having done the route that he climbed, I've done that route twice actually. The thought of untying my rope at any time or doing anything like that on that cliff is unthinkable.
Unprotected.
I mean, yeah, you have to undo your harness when you need to go to the bathroom up there, and so you have to rig up a chest harness, kind of a setup. But it's just, untying things up there just feels so insecure.
Right, insane.
Yeah, the actual thought of climbing that whole rock face without the rope, it's beyond mind blowing, Steve. It's just next level.
Wouldn't do it.
Alex's mind control is just unbelievable, and his supreme confidence to be able to take on a route like that is just totally unprecedented in the climbing world.
Unique.
Yeah, insane, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I did some climbing years ago like you when I was a lot younger, and we were climbing in a place called Crack Canyon in Colorado, which is in the San Juans. And my buddy, I used to say he had that no fear disease, and when he'd go set these climbs up, because we were taking some kids with us, he'd just climb up maybe 7,500 feet and set up a belay, and he said, come on up here with me. I'm like, I'm not, if you rope me in, I'll come up. I'm not doing it just the way you're doing it. I just, I've seen him jump across crevasses with the big bag of ropes over his shoulders, and just thought, but he's fine. He's in his 60s now, and he's perfectly healthy. So somehow he made it.
Good. Yeah. I think one of the things about free soloing is that, if you look at the climb, if you have any doubt at all in your mind that you cannot make it, you're not going to do it. So
already you're done.
Yeah. So there is that one built-in safety factor right from the beginning. You're not going to do something anytime in your life if you think you're going to die. So if
let's not.
if you don't think that you can make that particular move, then you're probably not going to do it. So people normally free solo well within their climbing capability. But definitely Alex's achievement is off the charts. Yeah.
Wow. I'm kind of curious, where does this sense of adventure come from for you?
Yeah, it's, I've always been a pretty adventurous, independent little boy growing up. I was always off fishing or, hiking around, exploring. And I went to like a boys' private school up in the Scottish Highlands. Actually, it was kind of like Harry Potter without the magic kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. If you imagine like those old Scottish castles and wearing the kilt and the blazer and all that stuff. Yeah, in these kind of remote parts of Scotland. But I grew up going to school on the banks of the Spey River, probably the most one of the most famous salmon rivers in the world. And Steve, the origins of the Spey cast. So
sure.
So from the age of 9, I would that's kind of when I got my start with fly fishing, and I would sneak out of the school boundary and go sit on the banks of the Spey River and watch all these Scottish gillies, the guides, dressed in their traditional tweeds and throwing these big 2-handed split cane rods and catching salmon. And it just, I was already fishing for warm water species growing up as a kid in England. And so it was the next transition for me. One of the teachers was a fly fisherman, and we had a fly fishing club. So I started tying flies and fly fishing at the age of 9 on the banks of the Spey River, and also on the Fiddoch River, which comes through Glenfiddich, the whiskey is named after. So they used to draw the water out of the Fiddoch River, and I used to fish for little brown trout in that. And so, these kind of private Scottish schools, they have big outdoor education programs. So as a kid from the age of 9, I grew up fly fishing and kayaking and rock climbing and skiing and all this. That was just part of my school education for for about 8 years. Yeah. So I was doing all that stuff as part of my schooling, and as well as sports and everything else that I was involved with. But that's kind of where I got my passion for the outdoors. And then my father ended up with a small adventure school company in the Scottish Highlands. And so I used to guide for him in the summer as like a junior guide. I'd take people out kayaking or take them rock climbing for the day, just tourists who were visiting our little village. And that was my passion. My passion was taking people into the wilderness. And so after high school, I started traveling the world, taking people on adventures on rock faces, on rivers, mountain biking, anything they wanted to do, I could guide them. I'm a pretty accomplished backcountry chef as well, Steve. So I can cook for you.
Is that right?
I can take you fishing, and I can knock out a meal with a Dutch oven for you.
There you go. Oh my gosh. Well, if you could do it all over again, would you do anything differently?
No, no, never. I've had a fantastic life. I've met all kinds of incredible people, both all over the world. I've mentored lots of people in my life, and we built up our business in Nepal and all those countries with lots of local guides who we would train up. We would meet them on the river. These like little Nepali boys, they'd be like swimming around the river right outside their village, and they would come down and would make them wash dishes and would give them a little bit of food, or they'd jump on the back of our kayaks and would take them through a rapid, and so we would get
Really?
to know,
Oh, fun.
yeah, we would get to know lots of these young Nepali boys just from floating down the river. And then as they became older, we would, talk with their parents and see if they would allow us to bring them into Kathmandu and, educate them and train them. And so we have a pretty nice legacy out there in that part of the world of,
Yeah, cool.
local people that we've trained up, and lots of them still live there. Lots of them left, and we have guides who are in Iceland and, all over the world now, Norway, America.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
You
so,
mean guides that you've raised from these years way back, and now they've spread out all over the world?
yes. Yeah. I mean, these were like small, 9, 10, 12-year-old boys who, raised on the banks of these rivers in these tiny villages. And we just got to know them from floating down the river. You'd like float by in your kayak, and they'd swim out and jump on the back of your kayak, and you'd take them through some rapids, and so we got to build these relationships with them, and help them with their education and their guide skills. And with lots of our guides would come from New Zealand or from Norway or from different parts of the world. So we had great connections throughout the whole world. And of course, those guides built friendships with our local guides, and that opened up opportunity for them to say, hey, if you want to go to Iceland to be a river guide, we have a close friend there who's willing to mentor you and get you set up in that part of the world. And so we would encourage that. So that, led to lots of our staff traveling the world on the international scene. And some of them, like I said, they actually still live. They don't live in Nepal. They have their families in different countries, and they can
No kidding.
support their families back in Nepal with the money that they make. Yeah.
What a great story.
Yeah.
That's something else. I'm curious, what about you? What has guiding given you personally? An appreciation of what, would you say?
I think it's given me a great appreciation of the areas that I guide in. I've been fortunate enough to guide in Africa and all over the world, and like I mentioned, throughout the Himalaya. But it's given me a great appreciation of the wilderness, and the fact that we need to preserve these areas, and the Middle Fork, places like this that we need to protect. So that, and also, I just met some wonderful people. I've guided people from all walks of life, from some of the movie star people here to, people, backpack travelers in the Himalaya, but just met some really great people in my life. And I feel super fortunate to have done that and impacted their life, and, taught them about the wilderness or taught them about rock climbing. Maybe they have grown obviously from those experiences. That's been super rewarding. And as I mentioned earlier, just my kind of mentoring over the years, that's probably one of our bigger legacies in the Himalayas, as far as what we have done and what my partner continues to do out in that part of the world, mentoring and training local staff.
Yeah, and you're now, you're part of the USA Youth Fly Fishing Program, and you're mentoring some kids in that?
I did, yeah. Several years ago, I started mentoring a young boy up here in Ketchum. I think he was 11 at the time. And he was being homeschooled, and his parents they were looking for some other fun activities for him to do. And so I started mentoring him in fly fishing and fly tying. And, I couldn't ask for a better boy to mentor, because he was just, after the first cast, he caught a fish, and on a fly that he had tied 2 hours earlier in the morning. We fished in the
perfect.
afternoon. Yeah, he caught a fish, and in like a beautiful 14-inch rainbow. And that was life over as he knew it. It was like he just wants to fish for the rest of his life. So I had a very, very willing student. So I was very, very fortunate about that. But basically, throughout our time together, it led to me becoming involved in the U.S. national fly fishing team with the junior team. And he had this competitive streak in him, and it led to competitive fly fishing. And so now I host the junior national team out here, and they come out normally once a year, and they come out and they fish in all our local waters here. And it's great. It's great for me. It was James, the boy, he ended up making the national team. Unfortunately, it was during COVID, so he didn't get to travel. And he has since aged out. But super rewarding to have these young boys come up, and I can continue my mentoring, with their fly fishing skills. And, we do a lot of conservation with them too, so they can keep the sport going and keep all of our fisheries healthy.
Good for you. That's fantastic. All right. What's the one thing you want people to know about fly fishing the Middle Fork?
Oh, it's just, it's the Middle Fork is one of those bucket list trips, Steve. It's like, if you have an opportunity, really make it happen. Like I said, the fly fishing is fantastic, but just the whole experience. It's 6 days, beautiful wilderness, so much to offer with everything, like I was mentioning, the wildlife and the hot springs, and then the camaraderie of the people on the trip and the great food. It's an absolutely unique experience, and I feel quite humbled to be able to have spent 30 years of my life running that river, and I do still run it. So it's a very, very unique experience, and something that if you have an opportunity to do, or you've always wanted to kind of do it, I would encourage you to jump on it and just go out and have a great time out there.
Well, I sent my buddies that I fish with a link this morning to this river and said, this looks like a good trip for next year. So I may be calling you. Who knows?
Yeah.
Guy, tell me, I always ask my guests, what's your favorite place for the hungry, thirsty angler at the end, not of the day, because it's a 6-day trip, but the end of a trip like this, like any top restaurants in the area that you really like?
Yeah. I mean, there's some great little, on the drive back, there's a couple of small towns, Salmon and, Chalice. There's some great little bars, some like local little bars there. Salmon has its own little brewery going. If you're coming back through Stanley and Ketchum, again, we have great foods here. Often people will come back, spend some time here in Ketchum, and people flying out of Boise will often spend time here. But there's some great bars throughout all the towns. You can stop, some little hole-in-the-wall bars, and, meet some of the locals and have a burger and get to experience some of the local flavor.
Tons of cool towns. All right, Guy, thanks so much for being on the show. Really enjoyed it.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for inviting me onto Destination Anglers. It's been great chatting with you, and maybe next year we can float down the Middle Fork together.
Yeah, how about that? How can people get in touch with you if they want to book a trip?
Yeah, the best way to contact me is probably through the Silver Creek Outfitters website, and then they can just use my email address is there. If you are coming up into the area and you either just need some information, you can contact me, or if you're interested in fishing locally around here or specifically Middle Fork trips, I do one small trip every year down on the Middle Fork now, and small groups of 6 to 8, normally in September. I'm available, June, July, August for special trips. Yeah.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, listen, I wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow. And folks, thank you for listening to another episode of The Destination Angler. We'll be sure to post Guy's contact info on the Destination Angler show notes and pictures of his top flight picks on our Facebook and Instagram page. You can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shake50@gmail.com. Hey, if you like the show, please share it with a buddy. As always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain, a cool little band out of Colorado. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again soon. Tight lines, everyone.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see. Yeah.